welcome. We'll wait a few minutes to give a chance for others to join, and then we will start the proceedings. Am I audible to you? Any one of you can just let us know. Am I audible? Are we audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. We're waiting a few minutes for giving people a chance to join.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. In 1 minute, we'll get started.
Yes.
So we'll start.
Yes, Professor, please.
Dear friends, a very hearty welcome to each and every one of you for joining us today. My name is Chiranjeev Sen, and I'm a visiting professor at BMU in the School of Liberal Studies. The Dean of the school, Professor Arindam Banerjee, he is in the field. He's joined us online, I see, but he's on a field immersion visit, so he asked me to chair the session today. This occasion that you joined us is a very important occasion for us because it is the inaugural seminar in the inaugural event in the policy webinar series that is being launched at BMU by the Center for Public Policy and Governance. The center is anchored by the School of Liberal Studies, and we hope to have partnerships. We do have partnerships with all the other schools in the university. This webinar will be a monthly series that we are starting, and it will be conducted online to enable people to join from afar. It's not so we'll use that technology to reach more people. In this series, we shall have the opportunity to engage with leading experts and practitioners on important topics that are of great, urgent, current significance in public policy. And today we are very honored to have Professor Biswajit Dhar, to speak to us about exactly one such topic, which is on everybody's mind, namely Trump's tariff war, its effect, and possible options for India. Professor Dhar is India's leading expert on international trade policy. Mr. Trump has created an unprecedented challenge for Indian trade. The situation is ongoing right now and evolving even as we speak. Professor Dhar will speak to us for about 40 minutes, and we have allowed sufficient time for questions and answers and discussions with all the participants. Professor, my colleague, Pranav Trigunaya, will moderate the session. Before I ask Pranav, request him to formally introduce Professor Dhar and to moderate the session, let me take a few minutes to tell you about our newly established Center for Policy and Governance, Public Policy and Governance at SOLS, School of Liberal Studies in BML Munjal University. Our mission, this is our first public event, and our mission, in a nutshell, is to provide a platform for addressing major policy problems that confront our country. We are living in turbulent times, and there are rapid changes in technology, in society, in economy. The established rules of the game and institutional mechanisms are eroding and giving way. And even on a macroeconomic level, the era of market liberalization and globalization of the economy, with which we have lived for the last 30 years plus, may be over. And Mr. Trump's action is a clear signal that this is what's happening. And in fact, many countries have taken to industrial policy. There are many other crises and challenges that are developing, and I'll just name a few. This is not to say that BMU, we ourselves will be conducting work on each of these. Our plan of action is being chalked out, but just to mention the major things on our mind, we have the climate change and environmental crisis from the Himalayas to the Indian metros, which is posing an existential threat. There is the issue of artificial intelligence and its potential impact on employment and on society in general. And then there is, of course, on the political plane, the unsettled South Asian political environment, which has become suddenly very difficult and problematic. So these are these emergent problems that we'll have to, as a society, deal with. But at the same time, there are a whole host of other endemic, entrenched problems which continue to trouble us, with which also we must engage, namely economic inequality, unemployment, poverty, oligarchy and the threats to democracy, social discrimination and injustice. I'm just naming a few, just to give you a sense that we're living in very difficult times. And in these conditions, we feel at the center that policy solutions must be found to address these complex problems. And we believe that nobody can do it. The public must be involved. And it's not a situation anymore that we can just sit back and let anybody, the government or anybody, just deal with it. We have to engage. And so in that sense, our approach to policy is very public. We want to encourage discussion, debate. And our guiding philosophy in this, as I mentioned, is that we must all contribute to create solutions and build awareness. Our emphasis will be on trying to not only understand, but also to find, build awareness, probably contribute to consensus, and think about solutions. We like to be oriented towards solutions in dealing with these emergent problems. And our approach to this is that we wish to mobilize expertise from multiple sources and multiple perspectives. For example, many disciplines like economics, law, sociology, technology, psychology, and management will find expression in our programs, including our teaching. And also, we would like to build partnerships with other institutions and collaborative understanding with academic institutions, research institutions, government, civil society, and business. Typically, and today, for example, not surprisingly, we have a huge expansion of the public policy field. It's a very dynamic and developing field. But typically, public policy is discussed through the lens of some technical professional field like economics or management or law. At BMU, however, we want to build a new dimension, which we think is extremely important but relatively neglected. And that is the question of values, ethics, and norms, because we believe that these ethical principles are extremely important. And if they decline, then the effectiveness on public policy as well as market functioning is severely weakened. And therefore, in our activities, we want to sort of build in this element so that we strengthen the foundations of behavior so that we can create a good society. A society that should not only focus on accumulation and consumption, but also, more importantly, return to the problem of human upliftment and fulfillment of our human potential, which after all was the goal of our policy at the time of independence. For example, yesterday's news says that Kolkata was deluged by this huge cloudburst. 300 millimeters of rain fell in 4 or 5 hours and the entire city is underwater. Someone sent a message today that The Economist has run an article with pictures saying that why is India the dirtiest and most polluted country in the world? I'm mentioning this just to say that these problems are not going to go away with tweaking incentives or through regulation or even fiat. We have to change behavior. We have to look at it from a multidisciplinary perspective. Anyway, the CPPG, our center, will work on multiple dimensions. This platform is one of them, platform for debate, discussion, and dissemination, policy deliberation forum. But we also are planning, and actually most of our energies right at the moment are devoted to creating a Masters in Public Policy program, 2 years, which we hope to launch in 2026, next year. Apart from that, we will be conducting short-term training programs, and of course, most importantly, research and publications on public policy, as well as dissemination through materials such as policy briefs. We hope to build partnerships with a lot of people, and we hope to have visitors and visiting fellows and professors in our midst. We seek your blessings and support and collaboration in this journey we've just begun. And let us join together, everybody, and let's create a vibrant ecosystem of public policy practitioners and institutions that can work together collectively in an open spirit to move our country forward. We will be updating our emailing list. Many of you have gotten information not on the mailing list, but from WhatsApp. So on the poster, you will find an email address given. So if you haven't joined, please send us an email. So we will put you in our mailing list and keep you notified about all our activities. Thank you very much for your patient attention. And I'm sorry to stand between you. I will no longer stand between you and our speaker and the topic you're wanting to hear from him about. And so I'll request my colleague Pranab Druganayat to take over the proceedings, introduce Professor Dhar, and launch the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sen. We have a very esteemed speaker for today's webinar. Professor Biswajit Dhar is a trade economist who was previously associated with the Center for Economic Studies and Planning at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He served as the Director General of Research and Information System for Developing Countries in Delhi, which is a think tank of India's Foreign Ministry. Professor Biswajit Dhar was also instrumental in the establishment of the Center for WTO Studies of the Government of India, and he also headed the center for several years. He has also served as a member of the Indian delegation to multilateral treaty negotiations, including the World Trade Organization, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. He was nominated in the expert groups of several intergovernmental organizations. Professor Dhar has been working extensively with a number of intergovernmental organizations, including United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, the United Nations Development Programme, the Food and Agricultural Organization, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the International Labour Organization, and the World Health Organization. All of these organizations work on issues at the intersection of trade, and Professor Dhar focuses on that, the intersection of trade and sustainable development. He has also served on the board of directors of the Export-Import Bank of India and was a member of the board of trade for the government of India. So without taking any more of your time, I would like to invite Professor Dhar for his talk. Over to you, Professor Dhar.
Thank you, Pranav, and it's a great honor. And Chiranjita and Arindam asked me to deliver this lecture, and this is the first lecture of your series. So, it couldn't be a greater honor for me to deliver this lecture and to be present here. Now, this topic, as Chiranjita said, that it's in everyone's mind. In fact, the pace at which things are evolving in Washington is absolutely bewildering, and every night, since I'm, working and thinking about these issues all the time, the last thing I do at night is to look at my iPad to see what's going on in Washington and what new missile Donald Trump has fired at us. And in the morning, I do the similar thing. During the time I was sleeping, what all has actually gone on in Washington, and for us to be bothered about, to be worried about. Now, as you know, that it's no longer a trade war or tariff war. What President Trump has done is now expanded the ambit. On 19th of September, he brought in this whole the new sort of the fees for H-1B visas, and increasing the visa fees by almost sort of 20 times, and it's a million lakh dollars, $100,000 for the visa fees, and so clearly what Trump is doing, he's taking his war beyond trade, what merchandise trade. He's now taking it to the services. Now, one is wondering what comes next. So after this segment, movement of people, in which India has great stakes, and I know as someone who participated in the trade negotiations for a long time, this was one area, and this is one area where India has an offensive interest. India is a demandier. In all other sectors, unfortunately, our competitiveness is pretty low, and we are on the back foot. So we are rather defensive, on these trade negotiations, both bilateral negotiations and multilateral. It's taken enormously long time because we are reluctant to open up our economy. But one sector where we want opening up to take place almost instantaneously is movement of people. And in the WTO parlance, we call it Mode 4, and which is what H-1B visas cover. So it's really hitting at the heart of our negotiating, sort of strategy. Something that, affects us quite deeply is what we are seeing now. And as I said, that we don't know what is going to come next, where the hit is going to come next. Now, let me go over a bit on the genesis of the Trump tariffs and how we have reached here. Now, this was clearly coming, and we were all following what happened during Trump's first term in office between 2017 and 21, and he took a series of actions there again, sort of taking on trade partners using tariffs. But those actions were mostly sectoral. These were not sort of across the board that he's doing now. A number of areas, for instance, steel, aluminum, and several other sectors, he increased tariffs, and defying the multilaterally given rules which were agreed in the WTO. And of course, with China, the situation was different because he began a trade war with China, and but generally we got an idea where Trump was going. So his "Make America Great Again" strategy came really in his first term, and that was a kind of, as we look back from where we are today, it was a kind of a trailer which was sort of slowly kind of unfolding over the next 4 years. And in the next 4 years, of course, he concretized this. And for the president of the largest country, or to be the president during the campaign trail, he's on record having said that the tariff is his favorite word, and he would like to use tariff as he goes forward. Now, so he made a major campaign promise that he's going to ramp up tariffs and eliminate the unequal kind of treatment that all his trade partners have been giving the United States, and he wants to sort of reverse it. And again, it's quite bewildering how he's built his completely false narrative about the unequitous kind of status that the US faces in the global economy. For any sensible person looking at the global economy, you just can't argue that US has been deprived. In fact, for us, the developing countries, we've always had this problem that the US was far too aggressive, leaving far little space for us to develop. And again, we have seen it in the trade negotiations all the time that we have always been fighting a losing battle in terms of trying to get some additional space in the global markets. But here comes Trump and says, no, I have been actually wrong. Our trade partners actually put much higher tariffs as compared to what I do, forgetting what is happening in more generally. So what is happening today in terms of the Trump tariffs is a kind of trade protectionism that is completely unprecedented. In fact, the last time we saw a similar, not as much, similar or lesser scale of trade protectionism was almost 100 years back when another Republican president, Herbert Hoover, he started, and it's very strange to read these two narratives, the Trump narrative and the Herbert Hoover narrative, and it's just very similar. So they are on the same trail on trying to make America great again, and then they start launching their trade war. Herbert Hoover backed the infamous Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in 1930. And the impact of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was such that it deepened an existing trade, the economic crisis that had already happened after the stock market crash in 1929. So a lot of analysts have actually said that, well, the Herbert Hoover, the Herbert Hoover's actions and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act were not primarily responsible for the Great Depression, but certainly they deepened the crisis and that led to the Great Depression of the 30s. So whenever this word of trade protectionism came in the next decades, mine always went back to the Great Depression and the causes of trade of that Great Depression, which was the trade war that took place at that time. So as many of us know, that there was this trade retaliation by most of the of US partners, leading to the coinage of this term that we have often used, beggar thy neighbor policies, because in a world where countries are getting at each other, no one can be safe, and no one can be secure. You are actually making everyone poor in that situation. So this beggar thy neighbor policy actually got coined at that period when the countries were getting after each other. Now, these catastrophic developments led to the decision that we need a global system of governance, a multilateral system of governance, where most of the major economies will have a stake in these institutions. And again, something that is quite well known, that this was done at the Bretton Woods Conference, convened by John Maynard Keynes in 1944. And these three institutions, the World Bank, IMF, and the WTO, of course, it was not called the WTO, it was called the International Trade Organization, which was decided the formation of these institutions. Now, so these institutions actually gave us the basis for economic governance in the post-war period, an elaborate set of rules that essentially provided transparency and predictability in policies to be adopted by countries for the smooth functioning of the global economy and the global trade. Now, the first impact on this framework that was developed in the Bretton Woods Conference was actually the first assault, I would say, was actually launched by the US itself. Because when the decision was taken to launch the International Trade Organization after the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade was signed in 1947, the US simply refused to accept the ITO because it wanted its Congress to decide on the rules of trade. And of course, the US wanted to keep its leading position in the global economy, and it thought that any multilateral institution which decides on its behalf as to what the two rules of the trade would be is not going to be favorable to the US, and US is going to lose out. So the first thing that the US did was that it broke the back of the multilateral trading system, didn't allow this institution to come up, the ITO, and the GATT then remained as an ad hoc agreement without really a proper organizational setup. But of course, it provided a set of rules which were consistently updated and reviewed and updated for the next several decades until the WTO came into existence. Now we all know that the WTO had or the GATT WTO system had several interesting features. Now, the first of this was that, of course, the developed countries wanted the developing countries, what they were then called the underdeveloped countries, to come into the multilateral, trading system. And the incentive they provided to the developing countries was that the developing countries would be allowed to maintain higher levels of tariffs, or when the tariff cutting exercise takes place, they would not be required to cut tariffs as much as the developed countries do. And this is termed as less than full reciprocity. That it was not reciprocal, what term that Trump is using today. So less than reciprocity was an inherent part of the WTO, the GATT WTO system, and this was again enshrined in what we call the special and differential treatment for developing countries. And this was really the incentive for the lesser developed countries to liberalize, and because no one would have accepted a big bang a liberalization of the kind that the developed countries accepted. So this was really the basis. Of course, the other thing was that because the developing countries needed tariffs for two reasons. The first, of course, they needed tariffs for developing their industries. So the infant industry protection argument really held at that time. Many of us, India, and of course in India, our entire import substitution strategy was developed behind tariff walls, and many other countries followed suit. So one was that development of the domestic capacities, both in industry and agriculture, was really extremely important, and tariff played a major role there. The second was the importance of tariff as the revenue implications of tariffs. Again, the governments needed revenue, and of course, tariffs provided handsome revenue for the governments. At one point, again, those of us who have been following India's development, customs revenue in the pre 1980 phase, the customs revenue was the largest component of tariff revenue, of a government's revenue, total revenue. And of course, now since liberalization took place, it has actually come down. So these are two major issues that are being discussed even today. Even when today we discuss tariff cutting in the WTO, these two issues, the impact that rapid cutting of tariffs would have on least developed countries. Now we're talking about more concerned about the least developed countries would have on them. And the second, of course, the tariff implications of tariff cut. Now, I provided this background because what the Trump is doing is actually breaking down each of these principles on which the global economy was functioning over these past decades. So this consensus which was built, and US was very much a part of this, now that is being broken, actually brick by brick, this is being dismantled, and this dismantling, of course, started, as I said, in his first term. The first thing that he did in his first term was that the WTO, of course, has a system of rules, but the rules have to be enforced. And how does the WTO enforce its rules? It has a very strong dispute settlement body, which works like a court, and like a court, when you actually have hearings in the lower court, and the lower court gives the rulings, then there is an appeal court. In WTO as well, there is an appellate body, a permanent appellate body, whose members are elected by the membership of the WTO. Now, the first thing that Trump did was that he refused to appoint new members to the appellate body. And when these appellate body members, their term was ending, their term could not be renewed. So we are today in a situation that the appellate body is non-functional. It doesn't exist, actually. And so whatever disputes there are in the WTO, the panel decides. There is, of course, disputes are going to the panel. Panel decides, but it can't be appealed. So these decisions of the panel can't be enforced. So WTO is there like a shell. It has a set of rules, and there is no one to enforce those rules. So WTO is almost effectively dead. Although it's functioning, but it's effectively dead because the most important arm of the WTO has been taken away. So in the first day of his second term in office, Trump announced, the framework which actually drives his trade agenda, which is his America First trade policy. Now this has several components. The first, of course, was that he just wanted to have a trade policy which would invigorate the American manufacturing sector and other parts of the economy as well, and support his a slogan of "Make America Great Again." So that was the first thing. The second was that he would use global supplemental tariffs to remedy the trade deficits that the US was maintaining with a large number of countries. And of course, the trade partners were not really responsible for these trade deficits. It was coming from the fact that the US was inherently becoming an inefficient economy, it was a high-cost economy, which was unable to compete with more efficient producers. And the second was, of course, the overvalued currency. So the overvalued currency was also hitting the Americans. So for these reasons, we had the deficit. But then Trump is now trying to reverse all this by imposing tariffs on countries, on his partner countries, so that they export less. So US imports less, and therefore the trade deficit can actually come down. The other important aspect of his America First trade policy, and we haven't actually seen that now. I think you're going to be seeing that in the next shortly. This is going to be unveiled, I'm sure. Is that he wants to charge countries for currency manipulation, now there is also a background to this, because the entire issue of currency manipulation is the responsibility, or to monitor this issue is the responsibility of the IMF, and IMF is on record having said that from all the investigations they've done thus far, they haven't found any evidence of currency manipulation. But then Trump, of course, has his own arguments. He would certainly bring cases against his his partner countries for having manipulated the currency. So if he sees that his trade deficit really is not coming down in the next few months, he's surely going to take a call on this currency manipulation issue. Okay. Now, then this whole issue of reciprocal tariffs. That's an interesting thing, because and it's frequently referred to India on this. So what he said is that India has very high tariffs on agriculture. It has the average tariffs on agriculture is 39%, while US's average tariffs on agriculture is 5%. Now that's a kind of a non-issue really, because what US does, that is actually uses very high levels of subsidies. And I know for a fact, in these in the negotiations that we had in the WTO, where I was also present, we used to have these bilateral meetings with the US, and the US constantly used to tell us that, look, we have eliminated tariffs on agriculture, so why don't you also do the same thing? And our argument used to be that if you reduce your tariffs, you don't have to eliminate your tariffs. If you reduce your tariffs, we'll certainly reduce our subsidies, because we don't want you to dump subsidized grains in our market. So that is where the discussions used to take place in the WTO, and from the exercises that I have done and looking at the cost of production data from the United States, in several of these major crops in which the Trump administration actually wants market access in India, I found that if you look at a long period, you'll find that the US actually their domestic the post-harvest price of these major commodities is way below the international price. Yeah, and in some cases, in several years, the post-harvest price is even below the cost of production. So what US actually does is dumping in international market. Of course, and therefore, if the price is below the international price, US producers can easily enter into the international market without any problems. And the efficient producers who are actually operating at international prices, they can't enter the US market. So this is something that we have actually spoken theoretically in the trade literature, that subsidies can be implicit tariffs. And this is that the US is actually showing it, that how subsidies can be implicit tariffs. They don't need tariffs. They actually use subsidies. The second thing they do is that it's difficult to export to the US because of what we call non-tariff measures. These are not barriers as such. These are standards. Yeah, these are all various kinds of standards, product process standards, and these have been going up rapidly. And US, of course, is one of the largest users of these sanitary and phytosanitary standards and technical barriers to trade. And they've been using these, and many of these are not even scientifically proven that these SPS standards they actually harm human health, but still they're there. So when you have a situation where your market is getting blocked, then what is the recourse? Do we allow the US agribusiness to dump their products in India? No, that certainly can't be the case, and that's where our trade negotiation, the bilateral trade negotiations that we started with the US in February, that has got stuck because US's primary interest is to get into India's agriculture market, the major commodities in the major market of major commodities, and that's where India has actually refused to allow this to happen. So when the reciprocal tariffs were announced on 2nd of April, India they have a very strange formula. I think several of you know of it, but still I want to repeat it. The formula that was used for estimating the reciprocal tariffs was that it took the imports from the US for each country and divided that by the trade deficit. Yeah. And whatever number they got out of that, now it makes no economic sense. Dividing your imports by your trade deficit, what is the economics behind this? Nothing. It's all mumbo jumbo. But I think in Trump's world, this is the only thing that actually exists. And whatever number came out of that was the reciprocal tariff. So India's number was 26%. And the highest, so it went from about 10%, I think, to 50%. The highest 50% tariff was imposed on Lesotho. This poor, least developed country in Africa, it couldn't actually buy anything from Africa, from the US, from a high-cost economy. It would rather buy from China. It won't buy from the US. And so Lesotho was imposed the highest tariff of 50%. And that's how things happen. So as Trump deals with several things in his own world, he actually prides himself as being the biggest deal maker. So what he did was he announced these tariffs and then put a cooling period of 3 months, and then he said that I'm allowing countries to come and negotiate with me. And at one point, he made this fantastic statement that, there's going to be a queue of leaders in front of my Oval Office. And these leaders would come and ask me, where do I sign? And where do I sign to do this deal, Mr. President? And I'm going to tell them where they have to sign. And this is what is going to happen. Well, at the end of the day, all he got was 7 agreements. And 2 of them, of course, from his strategic partners, the European Union and United Kingdom, and Japan, Korea. Also, they have strategic interests with the US, and 3 others, I think, the Philippines and Indonesia, and I'm forgetting the third country. So all he got was 7 signatures. So it's 7 deals, and what he was expecting, the most valuable signature that he was expecting from India, and opening of the Indian market, that is something that he did not actually get. After this 3 month of cooling period, and he gave some extension, and nothing happened, then he came up with his final set of tariffs. India has now 25% tariffs, reciprocal tariffs. And and this 25% is basically for India's refusal to offer its major agricultural markets like wheat, maize, and soybeans. Now, soybean has another side story. It's very interesting because the largest importer of U.S. soybeans was China. And when Trump started getting after China, what China did, I'm going to talk about this China thing in a moment. China's strategy to face the U.S. China started buying soya from Brazil, and they've sharply reduced their imports of soybeans from the U.S. Now, what's more, the interesting part of the story is that the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, he's one of the largest soya farmers, and he was supposed to divest his holdings, because this was a direct conflict of interest, and this was a requirement of the Congress, which he hasn't done. So now we're in a world where the U.S. Treasury, who's negotiating with India, is also part of the negotiating team. He's negotiating not for the U.S. He's negotiating for farmers of his ilk, of the soya farmers, and that's the fantastic situation that we are up against. Now, of course, now a few days later, after the reciprocal tariffs, and additional tariffs, the penal tariffs of 25% were imposed on us for buying, for importing Russian oil. And the executive order, you must read that executive order through which this 25% tariffs were imposed on India. It says that he is actually penalizing countries which are directly or indirectly importing oil from Russia. Of course, India is directly importing oil from Russia. Yeah, but there are other countries who are directly importing oil from Russia. China is, but China had no supplemental tariffs. The other interesting fact is that the largest importer of India's petroleum product after the Ukraine war is the European Union. So when the Russian oil, the pipelines, they actually dried up to Europe. Europe came to India and started importing the oil from India. About one-fourth of the total oil we export, or petroleum products we export, goes to the European Union today. So the European Union is indirectly importing Russian oil. And 9% of India's petroleum products, or India's export of petroleum products, goes to the US. So US is also indirectly importing Russian products. But no worries about that. India has been slapped 25% export tariff. No, that's the tariff on import tariff on its products. So that's why I think that the importance of agriculture is so much for the US, that I think all these things are happening, and I won't be surprised if H-1B visa is also part of this thing, because almost 80% of the H-1B visas are cornered by the Indians. So you never know. In this back room, they would be doing these calculations, saying that trying to find out where are the other areas where India can be India can be pushed so that it ultimately accepts the opening up its agriculture market. Now we all know why India imported the Russian oil, and now it's a known fact that the Russian, part of the reason, of course, we did it because the Russians offered us huge discount, almost 25% discount, and that was one of the major factors why we could fight the inflationary tendencies that had affected almost every country in the post-pandemic recovery period. So India was among the very few countries which escaped this, And a major part of this was that we are importing cheap Russian oil. So that was the main reason. That's something that we knew about. Now it's of course known that it was President Biden who had also asked the Indians to India to buy Russian oil, because he was worried that when if Russia stops exporting oil altogether, then the oil market would actually collapse, and rather the prices will go up so much in the oil market. There's going to be a major catastrophe, and US is also going to be affected because of that crisis. So he didn't want this crisis to be affected, to hit the oil market, and he also impressed upon India. Of course, and like I said, India did it for its own reasons. Now, we're looking at a pretty grim situation, because of these 50% tariffs that we are now facing, and the reason is that our exports to the US have been steadily increasing. Now, we haven't been doing very well on the export front. That's a known fact. But the only exception is the US, where our exports have actually increased tremendously on the back of two things. One, of course, the diaspora, which is really consuming a lot of stuff in India is selling there, and the second, of course, is the relocation of Apple factories in India, and mobile phone exports from India has actually jumped significantly. So over the last few years, our dependence on the US market, share of exports going to the US, have gone up from something about 16-17% to now, in the first half of this year, about 23%. Yeah, and that's a substantial jump. Of course, we have a substantial trade deficit, trade surplus with the US, and that's the problem that Trump is trying to fix, the $41 billion of trade deficit that he faces vis-a-vis India. Now, what are the sectors which are most affected? Mobile phones, like I said, almost last year in 24-25, 43% of the mobile phone exports were going to the US, and in the first half of this year, the share is 68%. Now, huge jump from there. In case of pharmaceuticals, is the next important sector, where about 40% of the exports go to the US. This was 24-25, and now it's about 42%. Again, it's going up. And the other two sectors which are important are rather three sectors: iron and steel, gems and jewelry, and garment. And of course, gems and jewelry and garment sectors could face a real problem, because they're because of their labor-intensive nature, and garment sector in particular is going to be facing a severe squeeze, in my view. It's already facing it, because the two major competitors we have, Vietnam and Bangladesh, they are facing much lower tariffs. They face about 20% tariffs as compared to our 50%. So the garment industry, the garment sector is in a bad way now. Now, what has been the government's response? And I'm just going to finish this in 5 minutes. So one of the things, again, we are talking about it now, is lowering of the GST. And the government is now trying to increase domestic demand to compensate for the loss of the export market. So the export demand has actually fallen there, and is going to be falling. So because we're going to lose about a fourth of our total export market. So the squeeze, the international demand, the falling international demand, we're trying to compensate by doing the GST. Now, so the businesses that are losing the US market can sell here. Now, there are a number of questions here. Now, is that the right way to go about it? And it's of course a short-term sort of a strategy, and a short-term it could work. But again, there are questions about it, and that how far can the lowering of these the prices, assuming, of course, that every producer is passing the GST benefits to the consumer, and that's a big if. How can they lift consumer consumption demand, which has been tottering for several years? Now we have been seeing this contraction in demand, or the demand deficiency has been a singular big problem that Indian economy has been facing, and we have been talking about it all the time. So how is it possible that this simple GST thing is going to fix everything? Does it revive demand? Now, what lowering of the GST could actually do is certainly going to lower government revenue, and there are reports that in the direct taxes front, the government is not doing very well. The numbers that are coming out of the advanced taxes are actually much lower, about 7% lower than last year. So that reason has to be found out. Why this is happening? In all, one can see that on the revenue side, government is going to take a hit. GST going down, and the direct taxes seems at this point to be a problem. Now, the switching of this between export and domestic demand would not actually compensate for the loss of foreign exchange, obviously, because now India is a import intensive economy, and the import intensity has been actually going up in all the major sectors. So we need foreign exchange from somewhere to compensate for the loss that we are going to be suffering in the United States. Now, but it seems that the thing that is required to be done, which is that we need to find alternate markets, and there's something that we have been discussing for a long time, that dependence on some big chunks of the markets. Earlier it was the European Union, which was largest partner. Now the US, and these two still account for about 40% of our total export market. Now, it's never a good thing to happen, and at least I know for a fact that for at least 15 years since I was closely working with the Commerce Ministry, I was working out ways in which we could expand our market elsewhere. Africa, certainly a big possibility. We had taken a few initiatives in the 2000s. In 2008, we had a big Africa India Forum Summit, and which was looking at Africa as a big market, but that was just abandoned. That initiative was abandoned. The Central Asian republics, which are now growing very well, and those are markets that can be tapped. But I think these are challenging tasks, and the government has to bite the bullet in order to save itself from the harm that is being done by the Trump tariffs. Now, I'll give you the example of China, and how we seem different from China in very respects. And this is another example of why China is very different from everyone else. Now, as I told you earlier, that China was targeted in Trump's first term, and during that period, almost 20 to 25% of China's exports were going to the US. Almost similar share as like us today. So China, when it faced the pressure from Trump, it started diversifying away moving away from the US. And today, in the first half of 2025, only 11.5% of China's exports are going to the US. So in about 7, 8 years, they moved from 20 plus percent to now just 11.5%. So that's the way China has gone, sort of decoupling from China, from the US, and keeping it safe. So I think that we need to take similar steps, because if we need any kind of stability in terms of our foreign trade policy, we can't be doing trade with a country which is now rocking the boat all the time. Our businesses need stable environment, and they need to do with trade with countries which will assure you semblance of transparency and predictability, which were what the WTO is trying to do. But we know it for a fact that in Trump's world, that is not going to be possible. That is not going to happen. And we still have almost 3.5 years before the next US president comes in. Who knows? Trump is actually wanting a third term, so he may actually continue. He might actually manipulate and get a third term. So I think the India has its hands full. The government has its hands full. The businesses and the government need to work together. This is something that is not often done in this country. It's in fact not done in this country, that the government and businesses working together. Something we have always been discussing in the context of the Southeast Asian countries, the Southeast Asian countries. The close coordination between the business and industry, which is the hallmark of their development policies. This is something that is not done. But I think it's now time for the government to actually and the industry to sit together and work ways of finding out how the next course of action is going to be planned out. This is something that the new center that you are setting up, Chiranjeev, you was talking about, could also actually take on board and could provide some useful advice as to what should be the way forward. So I stop here. I think I've taken more than I should have. But thank you for your patience. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Dhar. There are a couple of questions. I'll just read them out for you. So somebody's asked, what will be the effect on India's traders, and how will they search for new markets? There's another related question focusing on the distributional burden of trade disruptions vis-a-vis rural and urban, formal and informal workers, and how should public policy address these cleavages?
No, I think these are there are a lot of questions, really, literally, there are lots of questions for which we really have to find the answers. Yeah. And the distributional effects are going to be really, really huge. Because like I said, that there are several sectors which have major exposures to the US that are labor intensive. Yeah. And these are going to take a serious hit. Now, the government has to find alternate markets. Of course, it's easier said than done. That's why I said that these are all the questions that now we'll have to find answers. We'll have to put our heads together to find answers to. We know it for a fact that there is going to be a major disruption, and there are going to be distribution impact of this disruption. There's no questions asked about that. Yeah.
There's another question. How do these tariffs alter the competitiveness of Indian exports compared to other developing countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, or Mexico? And what implications do these developments have for India's strategic positioning in a multipolar world characterized by competing trade blocs and evolving geopolitics?
Yeah, I've already said this, that look, vis-a-vis other countries are competitors in several areas. our tariffs are much higher. So if you look at the U.S. market, in like I said, on garments, this is going to be serious decade. Now, the other thing, of course, is important in that now you're going to be seeing a very different kind of a geopolitics coming out of this. There is a discussion, of course, hasn't come to the surface as much, but there has been a discussion that of a closer cooperation between the BRICS countries. Yeah. And now BRICS is a much larger grouping, not just the 5 countries, the original, or not the original, but the 5 countries, which are, but it's not the much larger countries. Now, how can you have effective policy coordination between these countries? Can you actually think in terms of a larger alliance between the developing countries? Now, again, I know from your own experience, I can sort of narrate this thing that in the 2000s, when we had these Doha round negotiations, and the developed countries were constantly stonewalling any discussion to review the Inaugural agreements and make them more development friendly, give us more development space for us to improve our position. There was a serious discussion, that the developing countries should actually start thinking about trade rules that they should decide for themselves. Even then, we're doing the cold calculation, saying that as compared to the earlier decades, when the developed world has a much larger share in trade, today the developing countries have much. Even in the early 2000s, I said we used to say that today the developing countries are much larger, and their developed country shares are consistently falling. As of 2025, the situation has again dramatically changed. Our shares have actually gone up even further, and there could be a serious possibility of some kind of trade cooperation between the developing countries. At one point, we had, the UNCTAD had mooted this idea of generalized system of trade preferences between the developing countries, and this, of course, didn't go as far as we wanted to. But I think it's time that we think about, our markets. Like I was saying, that India needs to seriously think about reaching out to Africa, reaching out to Central Asia. So these are markets to be, But of course, there is also another possibility that a lot of analysts are talking about, which is that we, India, should be joining the RCEP. Yeah. Now, the RCEP we did not join because of China's presence there. Now, and there are a lot of, I think, even political reasons for us to back away from a trade formation which had a very large Chinese footprint out there. But today, I think there seems to be a thaw in the India-China relations, and the two governments have started speaking, and if India can ensure that its own interests are safeguarded against China's expansionism, and we are able to pull our manufacturing sector up with its bootstraps. Again, that's a big if, because our manufacturing sector, as you know, has actually been sliding pretty fast. When 10 years back, when our Make in India strategy was formulated, the share of manufacturing was about 17% of the GDP. Our expectation was in 10 years, we are going to take it to 25%. In 10 years, the manufacturing share has come down to below 14%. That's what the latest GDP numbers tell us. So now we need to do that, work at home. We need to really revive our manufacturing sector, and then we can't be actually going and joining trade blocs as junior partners. We need to be equal partners, and we need to actually reinvigorate our our different sectors, agriculture, manufacturing. So there's a lot of tasks that is to be done domestically to revive these sectors, to improve the competitiveness. And this is something that has not been done, unfortunately. And now is the time to, I think, do it and for moving forward.
Thank you, Professor Dhar. There's another question about the possibility of India pivoting towards alternative trade blocks, if that's realistically possible, towards EU, towards the global south, IPF, without compromising its strategic autonomy. And how might escalating trade tensions between the US and India affect India's positioning in these multilateral groupings like G20 and WTO and other global south coalitions?
Yeah, so I know I was talking about this. I was talking about the global south coalitions. And we do need to take them seriously because at different points we have been talking about doing trade, bilateral trade agreements with the South Asian, the South African, the development community, the SADC, and with the Gulf Cooperation Council, with the East African community. So we have been talking about this for a long time. Maybe this is the time for us to put them, sort of to finalize them and to put them into effect. IPEF, of course, unfortunately, is a US initiative, and I don't think Trump is going to be bothered about IPEF because since it was an initiative taken by Biden, I'm sure Trump is going to junk it, like the way he junked the TPP, which was an Obama initiative in his first term. But other formations certainly we need to, and my emphasis will be on the developing country for sort of coalitions and formations, trade. We need to increase our trade cooperation with the developing world. No doubts about it.
Yeah. One last question. To what extent do these dual pressures, trade and skill migration restrictions, risk eroding long-term knowledge bridges between the US and India? And what opportunities exist for India to leverage this crisis for a tech-led self-reliance or new regional alliances? I think you've already highlighted the bit on regional alliances, but does that lay a possibility for tech-led self-reliance?
Well, I think that see, this is I would say that look, any crisis is an opportunity to look at our weakness, yeah, and where why we are talking about this crisis today, because this is because of certain weaknesses that we have, and if we can reflect on our weaknesses, like I said, that today we are suffering because our exports are not diversified enough. And if we had worked on this earlier, maybe we wouldn't have landed up, and surely we wouldn't have landed up in this situation. So therefore, we need to work on these weaknesses, see where we are really deficient, and what we need to make our industry and agriculture more competitive. Yeah. Now there is, of course, it's easier said than done. Like I said, that there are a lot of these questions, but what the answers will have to be found, and really the answers have to be found in real quick time, because we don't have enough opportunity, because we are in a competitive space, and the market in which we were growing fastest, that market is actually squeezing us out, and so we have a even more difficult problem as compared to the other countries.
Yeah. I think that's all the questions that we have in the chat box. Any last word, Professor Sen?
I just wanted to thank Biswajit for a very interesting session, and we had a lot of interesting participatory discussion. I had one silly question in my mind, which I'll just ask you. You see, is it possible in the short run to have indirect exports to America? See, for example,
Sorry?
indirect
Huh?
exports. If, for
Okay.
example, there are lots of Indians in China and in Canada and elsewhere. Supposing they were to buy and sell to the United States market, because the market won't disappear. Is that a feasible thing in the short run?
Yeah, but I think Trump is keeping an eye on that as well. And then there are there are things like rules of origin, which are now applied rather stringently. So the origin of the product, and have these complex rules, and I don't want to go into all those details.
Right.
We can easily find where these products have substantially originated from. This kind of what we call circumvention. This is basically circumvention. Circumvention is not a possibility in today's world. Because countries have become quite smart, and a country like the US and their customs is really extremely smart. They catch these kinds of things quite quickly. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Biswajit. We really enjoyed having you. Deep gratitude for your presence. And on behalf of everyone here, let me thank you once again. Pranav, would you like to thank others who have
Yes,
helped us?
yes. So on behalf of the Center for Public Policy and Governance, I would like to thank everybody who took out time to attend the first talk that we've organized today. We'll come up with another talk in the next month, and this is just the beginning of a monthly series of webinars that we have. So for those of you who want to stay connected and stay updated, I've shared a Google Doc in the chat box. It would be great if you can share your details with us so that we can keep you updated about our upcoming talks. And Professor Biswajit Dhar's talk today would be available on BML Munjal University's YouTube channel. So any of you who've missed out on certain bits and pieces of the talk can for sure find it there. So thank you so much, Professor Dhar, for taking out your time for our first lecture, first talk for the center, and thank you everyone for joining us.
No, thank you very much. In fact, I really appreciate this, and it's a real honor, as I said at the beginning, that to have me as the first speaker in this series is really an honor for me. And thank you all, Chiranjit and Arindam in particular, who took the initiative to have me on this forum. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you.
So we'll call it a day then.
Pranav and Vaishal, you can stay back. We can chat a little after everybody goes.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.